Yo, this is Bench Gamer here, and I want to talk about a trailer for Honkai Star Rail that just released. There were actually two trailers that released for Honkai Star Rail in the past 2 days, one of which was the preview trailer for Imbiber Lune, the 5-star version of Danhen that we're going to get in 2 days. So that's going to be out for me on the 29th and the 30th for you guys, which coincides with a 1.3 patch release for Honkai Star Rail, also on the same day. But that's not really what I want to talk about for this video. What I want to talk about is this Myriad Celestia trailer, which you don't know. That's the title for the lore trailers of Honkai Star Rail. We got 4 of them so far, 2 for the Xianzhou, and 1 for the Aeons, and 1 for Kafka. Now, the reason why this trailer is interesting is because it sort of confirms something that I've been thinking about the Honkai Star Rail so far, that has been developing in my mind for quite a while now, that I wasn't sure about, but has become more likely over the course of the Xianzhou Luofu storyline. I say over the course of the Xianzhou Luofu storyline, but we've only really gotten one patch for the main story of Xianzhou Luofu so far. But there are a lot of things about the Xianzhou Luofu story that might seem off for a lot of people, myself included. And I think one of the reasons for this is that most of us come over from Genshin Impact, right? Or Honkai Impact 3rd, although I don't know what the Honkai Impact 3rd is specifically like, because I actually only played that game for about 2 to 3 hours before I quit. It was just too old of a game for me. I'm sorry. Maybe I'll go back to it when they get an engine update. But the point is, a lot of us are coming over from Genshin Impact, and that might give us... That might... I don't know what the word for it is. We have a lot of assumptions or presumptions about what the Honkai Star Rail story is going to be like, and what kind of plot structure it will take based on our previous experience with Genshin Impact. And that's not wrong, because Genshin Impact is ultimately the linchpin of Hoyo versus Success. That's really where they jumped off in terms of their global relevance to the gaming industry, right? Everybody knows about Genshin Impact. Honkai Star Rail is, even despite its success, is a much smaller game. At its current state, it's maybe like only a third at best, maybe like a quarter of the popularity of Genshin Impact, especially since Fontaine just released, right? Fontaine has probably around the same popularity rating as Inazuma, around the same popularity as Inazuma. It's still below Inazuma and Sumeru, but that's to be expected because Inazuma was the first major region and Sumeru had Dendro essentially. But Genshin Impact is obviously still a very popular game, and a lot of people coming over to Honkai Star Rail is still going to be Genshin Impact as more people get into Genshin Impact, and then once they're done with Genshin Impact, they might want to search for another game they want to try, and then they just happen upon Honkai Star Rail. So it's no secret to us that when we come over from Genshin Impact, we're going to take a lot of our presumption and assumptions about how the story and how the game structure will work from that game. But as the story for Honkai Star has developed, especially in the Xianzhou Luofu region, it seems like the story for Honkai Star is going to take off in another direction, specifically in how it does its content structure. And I've been noticing this for a while now, since the Xianzhou Luofu story. It's a speculation that I have, and it has not been totally borne out yet. But what I'm basically saying is that Honkai Star Rail is not going to have the same regional structure as Genshin Impact. In Genshin Impact, what I'm talking about is that when we go to a new region, that region is very self-contained. We go to a new region, we get a new element, we solve the local crisis, we talk to another Archon, we get to know that Archon, we get to know the local characters, we have all of this like buddy-buddy friendship relationship stuff that is going on revolving around the traveler. And then once we're done with that region, then we get to the overarching story throughout the entire story of Genshin Impact, which is the stuff about our sister, the stuff about the Abyss, about the Harbingers, about Celestia, right? Even though there is an overarching storyline, it is very much in the background of the story. Even as we get further into the story, even in Fontaine, when we get to the region, we're not really talking about our sister as of currently. We just asked, Noivlet, what the heck are we doing here? We just want to find our sister. And then he's like, nah, I don't know who you're talking about. But while you're here, why don't you just solve this problem for us in our great nation of Fontaine? And then you just go do that. Because what else are you going to do? But Xianzhou Luofu it's different, right? A lot of people have been confused or discontent. We have some dissatisfactions, myself included, about the Xianzhou Luofu story and how it's being told. And a large part of that has to do, not all of it, but a large part of that has to do with the fact that there is no real conclusion to the story. We don't get our Hunt Trailblaze powers at the end of the climax of Xianzhou Luofu's story. Yeah, after we beat Fantilia, we don't get our hunt powers. We have not received the blessing of the hunt of Lan. And we haven't really even solved the abundance versus the hunt problem yet. Or I don't know if we will ever solve it, because that's not our job as the Trailblazer. But it does feel like the plotline with the Disciples of Sanctus Medicus just kind of got, thrown to the side. We don't really get too much into it anymore. It was just sort of like this side plot with an NPC. And then the NPC Danshu just got jobbed by Fantilia, and then the conflict shifted over to this battle between the hunt versus the destruction versus the hunt versus the abundance. But that doesn't mean that we were done with the Xianzhou story entirely. And this seems to be borne out by a couple of factors. One, as I've mentioned already before, is that we haven't got our hunt powers yet. Two is the fact that the XP, the exported character from Genshin Honkai Impact 3rd, Fu Hua, is actually the supreme leader, or the overall leader of the Xianzhou Alliance in general. And this is like in the lore text somewhere in our commissions. It says that one of the quotations that we see when we go on our commission is that Marshal Hua is talking about going on a hunt for abundance. And Marshal Hua is the real leader of the Xianzhou Alliance, not Jing Yuan. Jing Yuan is just the leader of the Luofu, as we see here in the first trailer for the Xianzhou lore. The Luofu is ruled by Jing Yuan, the Divine Foresight, whereas all of these other ships, right? All of these other ships, the Yao Qing is ruled by Fei Xiao, the Merlin's Claw. The Zhuming is ruled by the Flaming Heart Hua Yin. The Juque is ruled by Yao Guang, the Seer Strategist. Fang Hu is ruled by Hua Yin, the Flaming Heart. I think I already covered that one. Or the Shiling is ruled by the Patina Justice. Fang Hu ruled by Xun Quan. All of these individual ships seem to be ruled by their own individual Arbiter Generals, as the title of these generals are called. So, given the fact that we have not finished the Xianzhou Alliance main conflict as of yet, Fantilia has gotten away, we don't know where Tingying is, all of these seem to be setting up for a grander story. Oh, no, not to mention, I almost forgot, Luocha hasn't really done anything yet either. And that at the end of his companion mission, we get to see him talking to the tree. The tree seems to be related to him in some way. And then there's also his light cone that shows like these branches coming out from his coffin. And then he also heals a robot. His powers of abundance are so powerful, he can literally heal robots, like non-organic matter. So the hunt versus abundance conflict is nowhere near finished. This Xianzhou Luofu storyline just seems to be the start of the whole abundance versus hunt plotline that we are getting to. Which is not the same as, Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact, we go to a new region, we solve that local crisis, and then we go to a new region. And between those regions is like this little connecting thread called Dainsleaf. And he advances the story a little tiny bit, one at a time. A little tiny bit of story here, a little tiny story here. Whereas we get to the Xianzhou Luofu region, and they just like lore dump all over us. Here's Yao Shi, here's Lan, the Aeon of the Hunt, the Aeon of the Abundance, the Aeon of Destruction. No, he has these like Lord Ravagers, who are like the Fatui Harbingers. And then also here are these like Arbiter Generals, and here's like 3 different immortal races, the Foxians, the Xianzhou natives, the Vidyadhara. You gotta know all this stuff. And I don't think we're all supposed to understand it entirely right away, because this is just the start. And in addition to that, we got more confirmation that all of these characters are going to be... I don't know if it's 100% confirmed that they will be revealed, but the fact that Marshal Hua is obviously hinting at an XP for Fu Hua, a character from Honkai Impact 3rd, who is like... I'm guessing one of the main characters, judging by how hyped people seem to be, how much of a big deal people seem to be making about Marshal Hua being referenced. It's likely that all of these characters are going to be shown at some point in the storyline for Honkai Star Rail. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to show us all of these names and all of these titles without us actually getting to meet them. Even though it does seem like the Yaksha trailer we get to see in Genshin Impact, the difference is that all these characters, as far as we know, are still alive. They're all guarding their individual ships. They're all on their individual ships. Like here we see Kaloran Venti, who might be an XE for Venti. I don't know if this is a translation issue or just a coincidence of translation, or if this is referencing Venti from, or Wendy from Honkai Impact 3rd and Genshin. But it would be really cool if we did see some sort of XP for Venti in this game. right? Here we see title Kaloran Venti, High Elder of the Yao Qing, successor of the Winged Dragon, Sovereign of Storms, bound to watch over the lunar embryo. And this is really interesting because the lunar embryo is like another Xianzhou ship's version of the Ambrosio Arbor. It's literally their Ambrosio Arbor, their form of immortality that Yaoshi gave them. Each dragon has to guard over one of these things. This one is like a cauldron, that's a moon, that's a giant cliff. I don't know if that's representing anything or if that's like, I don't know if their source of immortality is literally cliff. That seems to be just some random image. And this one's guarding like a mountain, but that seems to make sense because it's called Mons Grandis, High Elder of the Yuchi, bound to watch over the fallow earth. So there's something going on with the actual land itself. Fallow earth, I think, means something like very, very bountiful. The earth just keeps on producing new things, which makes sense given that it's a blessing of abundance. So I'm very excited for this. I feel much better about the Xianzhou Luofu story, even despite all of the things. Like, I do have problems with the Xianzhou Luofu story. I do think that the way that they handled Dan Shu was not done very well, but I sort of expected to begin with because she's an NPC. And because she's an NPC, you know, the amount of care and attention that the story can give to her is very limited because they don't actually have to sell the characters, so who the fuck actually cares about what happens to her, right? And even before she got jobbed, people were complaining that we went off to do this whole NPC side quest, and then eventually Hoyoverse just removed the quest entirely. A lot of people don't know this, but they actually removed the quest entirely from the main storyline. It is actually just a world adventure now, so you don't even have to do that quest to finish the whole story, the whole main storyline. Although they did it in a really non-committal way, you still get a warning for that story quest if you don't do it, and then it tells you like you will miss out on 60 primo gems or jades or whatever they want to call it in this game. So you're probably still gonna do it, but it's not part of the main story anymore, which makes sense given that Danshu didn't even like recognize us when we got to face off against her. But that's another issue that I will talk about in a future video. I want to make an overall review of the Xianzhou Luofu storyline that takes all of this into account when the 1.3 patch drops, and then actually get to finish the story. And then I will make my review of the entire story and talk about all the problems that are part of the story. So if you're interested in that, then hopefully you stay tuned. But I gotta admit, after I realized that this story is not the beginning, middle, and end of the Xianzhou arc, of the Abundance versus Hunt conflict, I feel much better about it. I don't feel as needy for a conclusion or resolution to the conflict as I did before. Before, I was like, well, Liu finished in 1.1, and now we're in 1.2, and the story for the Xianzhou Luofu isn't even finished. What's going on here? This feels really wrong. Why are they just, like, cutting things off? I still feel like it's very weird that they cut things off right after a major battle with no epilogue, no, like, cinematic or, like, JPEG slideshow that we did. I say JPEG slideshow, which is really, really bad, but that's essentially what we got after the Belobog fight, right? It would have just made a lot more sense for us to get a conclusion to that story right there and then in 1.2, but I suppose they don't have enough content to like tide us over. I think what they're concerned about. Okay, so this is going off into the problem section of the Xianzhou Luofu story. I think what they're afraid of is that they're going to have another situation like 1.1 where they don't have enough content. They don't have a main storyline to keep people like enthused about the game, and then if you look at the popularity of Honkai Star, it just kind of dropped off of a cliff. Which is not, like, it's not our fault, because 1.1 didn't have a main story beat. That was in 1.2, so of course people aren't going to stay around. What people consider main story content is essentially just the main story. And then, even then, after you finish the Battle of Ventilia, a lot of people are calling 1.3 filler as well, even though technically we do get the main story in 1.3 as well. So I don't know what exactly people consider filler or main story content, or like just main content nowadays anyways. People just seem to be very... Like, I feel like people don't know what they want for Honkai Star Rail, especially on Reddit. A lot of the stuff that I'm reading about, the criticisms are on Reddit for some whatever reason. It seems like Reddit seems to be the focal point of all of these criticisms. It's not like there aren't criticisms of Honkai Star Rail on other subreddits, but for the Xianzhou Luofu in particular, it does feel like most of it is on Reddit. Twitter, like Chinese forums, which I visit from time to time, don't seem to be nearly as up in arms about like the problems as Reddit is. And I didn't even realize that there were that many problems with the Xianzhou Luofu storyline until I went to Reddit. So maybe I'll talk about that later on. Maybe there's some, like, I don't know, regional bias. I don't think that's necessarily true, but I will cover that in a future video. But that's basically it. That's basically what I want to talk about. The Xianzhou Luofu storyline is not going to be the last we see of the Xianzhou. I think this is going to be much more of like a lantern right occasion, or like instance of, this is basically going to be the lantern right of Honkai Star Rail, in my opinion, because we're not really going to get a lantern right for HSR. HSR story does not have that like casual vibes to it. It's not like a place. The Xianzhou Luofu is not like this very happy go lucky place where we can just hang out and have fun vibes all over the place. The Honkai Star Rail story is not like that. We're not going to have the same festivals. We're still going to have celebrations, of course, but not to the same extent as Genshin. I don't think it's going for that vibe. And in place of the Lantern Rite Festival, which we will have some sort of version of in Honkai Star Rail, because it is ultimately a Chinese company making this game, and Genshin Impact does it every single year, I do feel like we're going to get a version of that in this game. And that version of that is going to be a new ship every single year. It might not have as much story content as the Luofu. Maybe it'll be just 1 or 2 patches instead of like 3 patches. But I do think we're going to see more of the Xianzhou on occasion over the coming years, as long as we keep following this game, which I am. I am deeply invested in most of the Holyverse games, with the exception of Honkai Impact 3rd. And it doesn't... I don't know if people consider this a bad thing or a good thing. It is just a different thing from Honkai Impact 3rd, maybe, and Genshin Impact, that most of us are coming from and expecting something similar to. And there's also a lot of other stuff I want to talk about, like the difference between the Aeons and the Archons, and how that impacts like people who want to pull for those characters. I think the reason why they're revealing all these characters is to create hype for them, essentially, right? Because we can't pull for the Aeons, we can't pull for like Vantilia or like the Lord Ravagers unless they do like a Tokyo Jutsu, and then they turn over to our side, and you know, it just seems really stupid. I feel like that's not something they want to go for. That's Genshin Impact shtick. We've already talked no jutsu our way into into solving too many problems. I know that there are people who have problems with how Fantilla is portrayed, her being just like a generic big evil baddie, but I almost prefer that compared to what they're doing with the Harbingers, right? Because the Harbingers, with this exception of Senora, and if you've seen the leaks, almost all of them are going to be playable, and that might be good for creating emotional connections with different characters, but it just doesn't strike me as very natural. It doesn't feel like it just feels like they're putting them out for us to pull for, right? And because we're not going to get that as much in this game, they definitely feel the need to put out more list of characters that we want to collect in the future, right? We've got the High Cloud Quintet, we've got maybe in the future we're going to get the Genius Society, we've got the Stellaron Hunters, we've got the Arbiter Generals, or whatever they're called, and now we've got the High Elder Dragons. And I think we're going to get something similar with the IPCs as well. Maybe with the IPC, the Interstellar Astral Peace Corporation, I don't know what the exact name is. We're going to have like all these high-level executives who are blessed by the preservation, and then we're going to get the Emanators of the Abundance. Maybe those will not be playable because those are probably bad guys, but yeah, I still enjoy this like a lot. I feel like the game has definitely fallen off a bit since it launched, but I'm happy with the content cadence of the game. I feel like they're adding a lot to the game, especially with 1.3. We're getting a new version of the simulated universe. We're getting new items for the SimU. We're getting another main story quest. We're getting another, well, I can't talk about leaks, but we're getting something in 1.4. And overall, I'm just happy with where their game is at, despite the problems that the Xianzhou Luofu story has put out there. Anyways, this is Bench Gamer signing out. See you guys later.